What's cooking, folks? Vermillion Phoenix here, and I'm jumping back into some adventure capitalism. So it looks like I actually have enough money to launch the 2 new planets, and it'll take about 3 days, so I'm just gonna go get those started. Boom. Okay. I'm not sure what the increased funding thing will do. Speed up launch by 2 hours, 10 trillion Earth dollars, 3 hours, 100 trillion Earth dollars. Wow. Okay, so I guess I'm waiting on that. But in the meantime, we're going to grab some upgrades. We are going to triple all of my profits. And then triple the money from the oil, which is ridiculous. I'm glad I was actually able to get those. So I guess if I'm going to rant this particular time, it would probably be about something that like kind of strikes me about certain types of games. I want to talk about sandboxes. And sandbox games are interesting to me because for a lot of people, especially myself growing up, video games turned into sort of an escape. Like you didn't really have too much freedom as a kid, at least not where I grew up. And with that, like games offered like this sort of like similar to books, like when you would read like fantasy novels or science fiction or something where that was kind of new and exciting. Games offered a lot of that because they would always put you in a situation where it was fight or flight and the stakes were high, and you basically have to figure out what was going on, whereas a book would just basically tell you what happened. With a game, you actually had to gain the skill to complete it. And I mean, that's the stories are always usually far-fetched. Like if you think of the early games, you were like the captain of a spaceship, and you had to fight millions of aliens off of like a lone planet, or you had to defend against some sort of missile barrage and prevent your base from getting blown up. And like really crazy, like you should never be able to do all of that stuff by yourself in like a realistic situation type of stuff. But games still offered those crazy situations for you. And then in the modern day, I feel like the epitome of that, like to give you like the ability to experiment and learn and roam and explore, like all of those aspects, like basically almost everything except PvP seems to be held largely in sandbox games. And once you sort of add the PvP aspect to it, they sort of turn into like weirdish MMOs. But like I guess you could see that in the most recent Grand Theft Auto 5, where they've added the online co-op, and like there's a lot of aspects to learning how to play the game, how to complete the missions, who you play with, and other things like that. I don't personally have the game, but a lot of my friends do, and we talk about stuff like this. But yeah, Sandbox seemed to sort of scratch that itch that a lot of people in society have, where they want a world that's foreign to them, but that they can become familiar with, where even though you don't necessarily start out as, the top of the food chain, there are multiple ways to get there, and it's really up to the players to choose how they want to do it. And then once you get there, literally you can do whatever you want. Like if you want to go ahead and, like destroy multiple buildings, you can just blow them up. If you want to, run missions or do favors for people, you can talk to them. If you want to just role play in the streets, like you'll see some people go around, like they'll hop in a taxi and then just start picking up people for cash. And they already own like multiple buildings, businesses, and they still want to do stuff like drive around in a taxi. And like to me, that's interesting because it means that no matter how powerful you become in a game world, like there are still like things that people want to see and feel that don't necessarily fall under the spectrum of you being all powerful. And that's something that I really like about sandboxes. In addition to that, you'll notice that a lot of sandbox games, especially those in recent years, and Grand Theft Auto was like notorious for this in the past. If you think about like the packages that you had to find in Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and so on and so forth, like there's always some sort of exploration item that you can find that will significantly increase your wealth, the breadth of items that you have access to, and so many other things. Games like Infamous, which is also a sandbox, um, they offer you the same thing where, you know, as you progress through the game, you get the ability to explore faster and farther. The only limiting factor that they gave you in Infamous was basically you and water don't get along, but that's a common thing for sandboxes to use, some sort of a land barrier, I guess would be the best way to describe it, to prevent you from kind of overextending yourself beyond what the developers wanted you to see at a certain point in the game. Like, they knew that they wanted the difficulty to ramp up, and part of that is to make sure that you're sort of gated by certain things. And again, Grand Theft Auto, one of the premier games, and probably why Rockstar has done so amazingly well with it, is because, you know, they took all of these concepts at a really early state and started implementing them into that series. So, I mean, if you don't know why Grand Theft Auto is popular, feel free to take a look. If you know anybody that has a copy or you have a copy yourself, just sit down and take a look at all of the different things that you actually get to do in there. It's not everybody's favorite game, but there is definitely reasons why tons and tons of people like it. And, you know, Infamous and Prototype, when that came out, and Saints Row, like, they all have the exact same building blocks. The only difference is the vehicle that they use to let you explore the game, which is the plot. And if you were to take the story out of those games, you would see that they all have very similar shells. Just Cause is actually a good example of newer games too. While they do have a lot of story, like, it's really big on, like, you just exploring how to interact with the world. And Just Cause is kind of unique in the fact that they like giving you tools to sort of interact with how everything works, especially the grappling hook, which is like the game's like signature item. Like, if you can do crazy stuff with the grappling hook, you have played a good amount of Just Cause. And that's like, just the videos that you generally see of people in Just Cause is usually them doing something crazy with the grappling hook or some sort of flying item like a flying suit. That whole idea of traversing an area in new and unique ways has always been fun. But yeah, sandboxes are awesome. If I actually find any that I want to put up on the channel at some point, I probably will take a look at some and just, you know, let you guys take a look at some of the different things that people do in them. But yeah, like, just it covers so many of the basics that people want out of a game. Like, you can explore, and regardless of what people say, like, not all of the earliest games were about exploration because they really didn't have the processing power or memory to put in like really complex expanse, like just huge areas for you to roam in. But part of the progression of video games, and particularly when you got to like the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation era, was when they started really offering these areas that were really huge. And that's incorrect. I'm completely ignoring like the advanced Dungeons and Dragons like RPG spin-off that happened between like early PC games, NES and SNES, because believe it or not, some of the biggest examples of exploration that you will ever see in video games will happen in RPGs. Like, those games are like 40% story and 60% exploration. Like, most of the mechanics for what you had to do in combat weren't really diverse. Like, you literally just gave your characters a command and they would do it. And so I guess RPGs are like the proto sandbox in that they were a bit more story driven and story oriented than your Grand Theft Auto games, or, you know, your current like sort of exploration based sandboxes, where they primarily tell you to sort of look around the world that you're in and you know, like just find new people to interact with and find new places. Because a lot of things that you would do in most sandbox games used to be very secret, and that actually was part of the exploration in old RPGs too, where you would do something like you'd go into a town and then there would be random people that you would have to talk to, and you were never really given often like a specific task, like go speak to this person in this place. It would always be like you'd enter a place and then like you'd walk past an NPC, and either that would trigger an event where like they told you to do something because it had dire consequences, or they'd ask you to help them out and you choose yes or no, and yes sort of put you into this sort of flagged story event that you would just kind of fumble down over and over again, but or not over and over again, but that you'd basically proceed through until you figured out exactly what was going on. But again, like part of the game was about just looking through like the terrain that you had to travel to, taking a look around dungeons that you would go into and seeing if there were chests that had like particularly good equipment or money or items that you'd be able to use later on down the road. Even with the first Final Fantasy, like most of the better items in the game were all completely optional. And I think that's one of the biggest part of like RPG exploration, is that probably about only 60 to 75% of the game is mandatory in RPGs nowadays. The Tales series is definitely a excellent example of that, where you won't even see the majority of the game until you either get towards the last boss or you get near the end of the game where you can actually complete it. That's been like a thing in Japanese RPGs for a really long time, where you just didn't have to do everything. Like there was a set amount of stuff that you had to do to complete the game, and you could finish the game really early. A good example of that for me was Final Fantasy VII. A lot of people talked about how difficult Final Fantasy VII was and why it was like super tough, but remember reading, and this could be completely inaccurate, that if you progressed past a certain point, that Sephiroth was supposed to be more difficult at the end of the game. Well, I rushed through everything, didn't bother like you know, raising chocobos or doing the majority of the mini games that existed. I didn't have any of the level 4 limit breaks. Like I just finished the game in the most noobiest way possible, and it was not difficult. Like Sephiroth was probably one of the easiest bosses that I faced in the entire game. And I did get hit with Supernova like 3 times in a row, which basically means that I aged 5 years while playing the game. But you know, it was one of the longest FMV attacks in an RPG at the time. I think it took about 2 minutes for each scene to literally pass. Like it was crazy, but like still, it was exciting. And when I played the game again at a later time, just seeing all of the things I missed, like the master materials, and being able to combine your materials into like sort of a finished full materia for use in like junctioning with support materia, or the like the final summons in the game, like obtaining Knights of the Round. Like there were so many things that I had just completely overlooked, like the fights with the weapons, something you don't even have to do, but that it's just there for people to figure out. And you'll find that especially with things like the weapons from Final Fantasy VII, or even the arena in Final Fantasy X, if you've ever done that one, they take on a very different aspect than the regular game, because instead of just being like your run-in-the-mill, you know, if your stats are higher than this enemy you can win situation, they actually function more as puzzles. And RPGs are functionally like math puzzles. Like as long as your stats beat the enemies for the normal game, that's what they expect. You just need to be tough enough that you can whack the enemies a few times and they keel over before you do. However, with the more secret bosses, especially recently, they pump the stats up on the bosses, so it completely changes the dynamic. So you'll get into a situation where you have to do things like chain attacks in a very particular fashion, or the enemies will have some sort of event-based trigger for using like really powerful attacks that you'll have to learn through trial and error, which literally means you'll be obliterated a few times and then figure that out. And I always thought that that was odd, but it was part of the learning experience for old RPGs. And while not too many games are keen on just blowing you up and then having you figure it out later, you'll see that there's a lot of learning that's been done from that, especially with FPSs. Like the whole idea of you not understanding what happened when you died is it was considered a problem for a long time. You used to just die and then you had no information about it. You'll see that nowadays almost every FPS that's meant to be competitive comes with a kill cam to sort of give away the position of who is shooting at you. So you can kind of deduce where they are and then flush them out, which is a major tool against camping. Because if you can imagine what camping was like in an FPS before kill cams, wow, it was annoying. It was probably one of the most aggravating things for people that were not like hardcore into a game. But you know, it's the way that games have evolved. And while some people hate the behavior, like the fact that games have evolved to sort of flush it out through mechanics and visuals, I think is a great part on behalf of the developers to sort of make the games more accessible to people that haven't played them for multiple years. And at the same time, it sort of changes the experience that everybody gets to get. And you'll find that if you play some older games, while the core elements of video games have largely not changed over time, like the little nuances and features that get added due to just player feedback, even if it takes a decade or so, are amazing, and they're part of what help us get like the really amazing games that come out over time. Like some pieces are literally just like masterpieces. Extra Credits actually has done they do repeatedly a series of games that you should that they would like you to take a look at for different reasons, whether they be aesthetics, story, design, or things like that. I highly recommend you check out some of their stuff. I'm probably going to wind up linking another one of their videos because they're freaking amazing. But yeah, they are awesome. And with this, I don't think I'm actually going to get anything particularly amazing to show up here right now. I'm going to take a quick look at my upgrades. So I need 20 trillion. There is no point in me getting 20 trillion for novelty straws here because I am not going to have anything. Alright, so have 2 angels. It's not enough to sacrifice for anything. I can't afford managers right now because all the managers cost angels or like super money. And once I can afford that much money, like money is probably not even important. If I restart now, I get 7 angels, which will give me a significant amount of increased money. So, 150 newspapers gets me a bonus to the car wash. I do remember that I was trying to get more oil rigs. I'm not close to either of those though. But the question becomes, for this at least, what is really going to get me the most payoff in the meantime? I guess if I'm not going to be looking at this again for a little while, the best thing to do would probably be just to grab takes so much less time than this right now, but those 9 are not nearly worth this 5. Alright, spend up the rest of the money. And I think that'll be it. If you guys have any topics that you'd like me to cover regarding games in a rant, that would be entertaining. I actually enjoy doing these. I didn't expect to do as much, but if you guys feel like hearing me talk about something, let me know. Because that is something I am learning to love doing. But anyway, I'm going to cut this one a little bit shorter because I don't have any really close attainable goals. We have the Moon and Mars launch happening in 3 days, so I'll probably let this game chill for another 24 hours or so before I even decide to look at the upgrades again, because I'm not really pulling in money fast enough to do anything significant. But I'll be coming back, and hopefully with a new topic to rant about. Again, if you guys have any topics, leave them in the comments. Feel free to like the video if you enjoyed this particular topic as well, and let me know what you think. Like, I haven't gotten too much feedback from you guys, but what I have has been amazing so far, so let me know. And until next time, have a good one, guys.